The fluorescent lights in the emergency room burned Sarah Mitchell's eyes as she gripped her son's hand. Ethan's pale face glistened with fever sweat, his 14-year-old body trembling beneath the thin hospital blanket. The cardiac monitor's frantic beeping matched her racing heart. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Dr. Harrison's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to take him to surgery. Now." Sarah's world tilted. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not again. Not after everything. 2 weeks ago, it had started with something so small, a wince at the breakfast table, her son favoring his right arm. She'd missed the signs. The same signs she'd missed 3 years ago when her husband Michael said he was fine, just tired, nothing to worry about. Now something was growing beneath Ethan's armpit. Something that would reveal a truth spanning generations, a secret carried in flesh and blood from father to son, from one war to another hospital room where Sarah stood, terrified as history prepared to repeat itself. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Sarah Mitchell had been a registered nurse at County General Hospital for 15 years, but the sterile smell of disinfectant still made her stomach clench. 3 years had passed since her husband Michael died in room 412 on the 4th floor, a room she still avoided during her night shifts. At 39, she looked older than her years, with tired eyes that no amount of concealer could hide and graying roots. She dyed brown every 6 weeks in her modest bathroom. Their 2-bedroom home in suburban Virginia held memories in every corner. The kitchen, where she made coffee at 5:45 every morning, displayed family photos on the refrigerator, except for one conspicuous gap where Michael's picture had hung. She'd removed it 6 months after his funeral, unable to face his smile every day. His dog tags remained in her nightstand drawer, hidden but never forgotten. Single motherhood meant working night shifts to make ends meet, coming home to check bills that seemed to multiply, and worrying constantly about Ethan. Worry had become her default setting, a byproduct of medical training that taught her to see worst-case scenarios in every symptom. Her colleagues called it nurse's syndrome, the curse of knowing too much. Ethan Mitchell stood 6'1" at 14. His sandy brown hair and green eyes inherited from his father. A freshman at Jefferson High School, he wore his number 23 basketball jersey like armor, a tribute to Michael Jordan and the scholarship dreams that kept him practicing until dark. Power forward. Team captain. The boy coaches praised for his work ethic and teammates trusted to make the winning play. But Sarah saw beneath the confident exterior, Ethan had grown distant lately, trading childhood cuddles for teenage independence. He wanted to be the man of the house, just like Michael had been, strong, stoic, never complaining. It was a dangerous inheritance. His best friend Tyler Bennett understood loss too. Tyler's older brother had died by suicide 2 years ago, a tragedy that bonded the boys in silence more than words. They shared an unspoken agreement. Pain was private, weakness was shameful, and asking for help meant failure. Spring 2024 arrived unseasonably warm, bringing basketball scouts and scholarship opportunities. Coach Thompson ran the team hard, and Friday night games packed the gymnasium with a community that treated high school sports like religion. Everything seemed normal, perfect even. But Sarah's nurse instincts whispered warnings she tried to ignore. Something felt wrong. She just didn't know yet how catastrophically right she was. Monday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Sarah stood at the stove scrambling eggs while toast browned in the toaster. The kitchen clock read 6:30. Outside, Virginia sunshine promised temperatures near 78 degrees, unseasonably warm for early spring. Ethan descended the stairs, wearing a black hoodie, his backpack slung over his left shoulder. Something in the movement caught Sarah's attention. He reached for the orange juice with his right arm, and his face tightened almost imperceptibly. A wince, brief but real. "Morning, sweetheart." Sarah slid eggs onto his plate. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah." Ethan sat carefully, keeping his right arm close to his body as he lifted his fork with his left hand. "Big game today. Scouts from Jefferson High will be there." Sarah noticed he wasn't eating normally. The boy, who usually devoured breakfast, barely touched his food, cutting small bites with mechanical precision. His right arm remained tucked against his side. "You're moving like your shoulder hurts." Sarah kept her tone light, non-accusatory. "Just sore from practice. Coach had us doing push-ups yesterday. Like 100 of them." Ethan's explanation came too quickly, too rehearsed. "No big deal." Sarah wanted to believe him. Muscle strain made sense. But something in his voice felt off, a slight tremor that betrayed the casual words. She thought of Michael 3 years ago, dismissing his persistent cough as just allergies until it wasn't. "Let me take a look." "Mom, I'm fine." "Really?" Ethan stood, grabbing his backpack with his left hand. "Just don't worry about me, okay?" The words hung in the air like an omen. Don't worry about me. Michael's last words before his final hospitalization. Sarah watched through the window as Ethan walked to the bus stop, his gait slightly off balance. She told herself to trust him, to respect his growing independence. But doubt gnawed at her gut. That evening at 8 o'clock, Sarah's phone buzzed in the hospital break room. Coach Thompson's name appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Mitchell wanted to give you a heads up about Ethan." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Is he okay?" "He sat out the last half of practice today. Wouldn't say why, but I noticed he wasn't raising his right arm above his shoulder." Coach Thompson's gruff voice carried genuine concern. "When I asked, he said muscle strain. But I've seen plenty of muscle strains, Mrs. Mitchell. This seemed different. The kid was pale." "Thank you for calling, Coach. I'll check on him." "He's a good kid. Tough like his daddy. Maybe too tough, if you know what I mean." Sarah knew exactly what he meant. When she arrived home at 11, Ethan's bedroom door was closed. She cracked it open and watched him sleep, his right arm positioned stiffly at his side, even in unconsciousness. Tuesday morning brought more evidence. Sarah pretended to be in her room but left the door ajar, watching Ethan dress for school. He struggled pulling a t-shirt over his head, grimacing with the movement. Finally, he chose a zip-up hoodie instead, easier to put on, better for hiding. After he left, Sarah counted the Advil tablets in the medicine cabinet. 4 missing since yesterday. She called the school nurse, a colleague named Margaret. "Can you keep an eye on Ethan for me today?" By afternoon, Margaret reported back. Ethan had skipped physical education, claiming a doctor's note that didn't exist. He'd gone to the bathroom 3 times during lunch, unusual for a boy who normally ate and ran. When Sarah came home early from her shift, she found Ethan's basketball jersey in the hamper. The armpit area bore a rust-colored stain, blood or sweat. She couldn't tell, but the smell, faint, distinct, triggered her professional instincts: infection. She recognized that odor from countless hospital patients. At dinner, Sarah tried the gentle approach. "How's your shoulder feeling?" "Better, Mom. Really." "Can I take a look at it?" "Mom, I'm not a little kid anymore. It's fine." Ethan's defensiveness rang alarm bells. That night, Sarah Googled teenager shoulder pain sports injury. The results offered reassuring explanations: muscle strain, rotator cuff issues, growth spurt, discomfort. She wanted to believe the benign possibilities. Wednesday morning shattered her denial. Taking Ethan's temperature while he slept, she found it elevated, 99.8 degrees. Not high enough to keep him home, but concerning. He refused breakfast, claiming he wasn't hungry. After Ethan left for school, Sarah did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She went through his room. The trash can held more Advil wrappers. His pillowcase showed a fresh blood stain. And his laptop search history made her blood run cold. Swollen lymph node, armpit, teenager. How long before infection goes away? Can you die from abscess? Ethan had been researching this for at least a week. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled out an old file box from her closet, searching for Michael's medical records. She needed to know if there was something genetic she'd missed. Flipping through the pages, she found notations about recurring infections Michael had dismissed, patterns of denial that now echoed in Ethan's behavior. Her son was making his father's mistakes, and she'd let it happen. Tonight, there would be no backing down, no respecting privacy over protecting life. Tonight, she would see what Ethan was hiding, even if it meant breaking his trust. Because Sarah Mitchell had already lost one person she loved to secrets and silence, she refused to lose another. Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock, Sarah knocked on Ethan's bedroom door and entered before he could refuse. He sat at his desk pretending to do homework, his right arm stiff and unnatural against his side. Sarah sat on his bed, her tone calm but unyielding. "I saw your search history." Ethan's face went pale. "I was just curious about something. Don't lie to me, not about this." Sarah leaned forward. "Why are you going through my stuff? You don't trust me?" "This isn't about trust, it's about your health." Sarah's voice hardened. "I'm a nurse, Ethan. I know what infections look like. I saw the blood on your pillowcase. I counted the Advil. And I know you've been in pain for more than a few days." Ethan's composure cracked. Tears welled in his eyes. "I didn't want you to worry." "Show me." Sarah stood, moving toward him. "Show me what you're hiding." "It's embarrassing, Mom. I'm your mother and a nurse." "There's nothing to be embarrassed about." Sarah softened her voice. "Please, baby, let me help you." Ethan's resistance crumbled. "Promise you won't overreact." "I promise I'll take care of whatever it is." Slowly, Ethan stood and removed his hoodie. Lifting his right arm required visible effort, each degree of movement bringing fresh pain to his face. He unbuttoned his shirt rather than pulling it over his head. When he revealed his right armpit, Sarah's professional mask almost slipped. The swelling was the size of a golf ball, angry red-purple in color, radiating heat she could feel from inches away. At its center, a small yellowish area indicated pus beneath the surface. Worse still, red streaks extended from the mass toward his chest, lymphangitis, a sign the infection was spreading through his lymphatic system. Sarah gently palpated the area. Ethan winced and pulled away. "How long has this been here?" Her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. "Maybe 2 weeks." Ethan's admission came in a whisper. "Does it hurt when you move?" "Yeah, a lot, especially at night." "Have you had fevers?" Ethan nodded. "Sometimes I wake up sweating." Sarah processed the information with clinical detachment, though internally her mind screamed warnings. This was bad, very bad. The size, the heat, the lymphatic involvement, this was an abscess that had gone far too long without treatment. "We're going to urgent care. Right now." "Mom, it's 7 at night. I have school tomorrow." "Ethan, this is an abscess. It's badly infected. If bacteria gets into your bloodstream—" Sarah stopped herself before finishing the terrifying sentence. "We can't wait." "Am I going to die?" The question came out small and frightened, the voice of the little boy he'd been trying so hard not to be. Sarah pulled him into a careful hug, avoiding pressure on his right side. "Not if we treat it now. But we have to go. Please trust me." Ethan collapsed against her, finally admitting his fear. "I'm scared, Mom." "I know, baby. I'm scared too. But we'll get through this together." The urgent care clinic's waiting room held the usual Wednesday evening crowd, a crying infant, an elderly man with a persistent cough, a teenager with a sprained ankle. Ethan's fever had climbed to 100.4 degrees by the time a nurse called his name. Dr. James Patterson, a 45-year-old urgent care physician with kind eyes and efficient movements, examined Ethan with professional thoroughness. He palpated the abscess, checked the surrounding lymph nodes, and took Ethan's temperature again. "This is a large abscess that needs incision and drainage," Dr. Patterson said, looking between Sarah and Ethan. "I can attempt it here with local anesthetic, but given the size and location, the armpit has a lot of nerve structures. I'd recommend going to the emergency room where they can do it under sedation." Sarah's chest tightened at the word emergency room. County General, where Michael died. Room 412 on the 4th floor. "Can we try antibiotics first?" The question escaped before Sarah could stop it. Dr. Patterson hesitated. "We can start antibiotics, certainly. But an abscess this size usually requires drainage. The antibiotics might not penetrate the pus pocket effectively. But they might work." Sarah heard the desperation in her own voice. "They might reduce the infection enough to make drainage easier. I'll prescribe Keflex, a strong antibiotic. Start it immediately." Dr. Patterson's expression grew serious. "But Mrs. Mitchell, if his fever spikes above 101 degrees, or if you see red streaks spreading, you need to go to the ER immediately. Don't wait. This could develop into sepsis." Sarah took the prescription with shaking hands, knowing she was choosing hope over urgency, avoidance over action. She was making a mistake, and some part of her recognized it even as she made it. The next 3 days passed in anxious limbo. Ethan started the antibiotics, and by Thursday his fever dropped to 99 degrees. Sarah checked the wound twice daily, still large, still angry, but not growing. Ethan returned to school Friday, sitting out practice but attending to support his team. Saturday brought no improvement but no worsening either. Sarah called Dr. Patterson for reassurance. "Give the antibiotics 3 more days," he advised. Sunday evening, Ethan reported feeling slightly better. Sarah allowed herself to relax, to believe they'd caught it in time. She scheduled a follow-up with their family doctor for Wednesday. That night, watching Ethan sleep peacefully in his bed, Sarah thought maybe the crisis had passed. Maybe the antibiotics were working. Maybe they wouldn't need surgery after all. She didn't notice that Ethan had taken 3 ibuprofen tablets instead of 2, didn't see that the pain was increasing, not decreasing, didn't recognize the calm for what it was, the eye of a storm that was about to break with devastating force. Monday morning brought the first sign that hope had been misplaced. Ethan's fever returned with a vengeance, 100.8 degrees. The abscess, which Sarah had convinced herself was stable, had grown noticeably larger. Now it resembled a small egg, angry and hot to the touch. "It hurts more than before," Ethan admitted, his voice tight with pain he could no longer hide. Sarah called Dr. Patterson immediately. "The antibiotics aren't working." "Sometimes bacteria develop resistance to first-line antibiotics," Dr. Patterson explained. "I'm switching him to Augmentin, a stronger combination. But Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to schedule a surgical consultation. Today, if possible." "How soon can you see him?" "I'm an urgent care physician. You need a surgeon. I'll send a referral to Dr. Rachel Harrison at County Surgical Associates. She's excellent. They should call you within 24 hours. Sarah hung up, feeling the ground shifting beneath her feet. A surgeon. A surgery. The word carried weight, dragging her back to memories of Michael's operations, the antiseptic smell of operating rooms, the terror of waiting for news. Tuesday brought another crisis. The school nurse called mid-morning. "Sarah, Ethan fell asleep in 3rd period. The teacher couldn't wake him easily. He's exhausted." When Sarah picked him up, Tyler pulled her aside in the school parking lot. Mrs. Mitchell, Ethan's been weird lately. He's avoiding everyone, even me. Something's wrong. That night, Ethan refused to shower. The simple act of raising his arm had become too painful. Sarah noticed the infection's smell even through his clothes, a sour, sickly odor that turned her stomach. She also noticed his jeans hung looser on his hips. He was losing weight. Wednesday morning, during her daily wound examination, Sarah discovered something that made her blood run cold. Below the abscess, she felt hard lumps the size of marbles. Swollen lymph nodes. The infection was spreading through his lymphatic system, lymphadenitis that could progress to sepsis. She called the surgeon's office immediately. "This is Sarah Mitchell. My son has an appointment Thursday, but I need to move it up. This is urgent." The receptionist's voice remained maddeningly calm. "Dr. Harrison's first available appointment is still tomorrow at 2 o'clock. If you feel it's an emergency, you should go to the ER." Sarah stared at the phone after hanging up. Emergency room meant County General. Room 412. The place where Michael had died. Could she wait one more day? Would one day make the difference? She decided to wait. It was a decision that would haunt her. Thursday at 2 o'clock, Sarah and Ethan sat in Dr. Rachel Harrison's consultation room. The surgeon was a woman in her mid-40s with steady hands and direct eyes that had seen countless emergencies. She examined Ethan with practiced efficiency, her face revealing nothing until she finished. "This abscess measures approximately 8 centimeters by 6 centimeters, Dr. Harrison said, pulling off her examination gloves. "It's fluctuant, meaning there's a significant pus pocket. The surrounding cellulitis and multiple swollen lymph nodes concern me." She turned to her computer, typing notes. "You also have a fever of 101.2 degrees. How long have you had symptoms?" Ethan glanced at Sarah. "Maybe 2 weeks?" "The truth, please." Dr. Harrison's tone was gentle but firm. "Closer to 3, maybe 4 weeks." Ethan's admission made Sarah's heart sink. Dr. Harrison nodded, unsurprised. "This needs surgical drainage under general anesthesia. The size and location near the brachial plexus, the nerve bundle that controls your arm, makes it too risky for a simple office procedure." "When?" Sarah's voice came out hoarse. "I can schedule you for Monday, 3 days from now, at the private surgical center. Or, Doctor." Harrison paused, choosing her words carefully. "You can go to County General Emergency today for immediate surgery." The choice hung in the air. Today at County General, where Michael died, or Monday at a neutral facility where Sarah could maintain the illusion of control. "Monday," Sarah said. "We'll do Monday." Dr. Harrison's expression suggested she disagreed but wouldn't argue. "If anything worsens before Monday, fever above 102, increased confusion, nausea, red streaks spreading rapidly, go to the ER immediately. Don't wait. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, already regretting her decision. Friday and Saturday passed in tense anticipation. Sarah administered IV antibiotics at home, her nursing skills allowing them to avoid hospitalization. As she inserted the IV line into Ethan's arm Friday evening, he watched her work with fascination. "You're really good at this. I used to do this for your dad." The words slipped out before Sarah could stop them. "Did Dad have infections like this?" Sarah's hands paused. "Yes. He had several during his cancer treatment. He didn't always tell me when things were bad." "Why not?" "Because he thought being strong meant suffering alone." Sarah met Ethan's eyes. He was wrong. The admission opened a door Sarah had kept closed for 3 years. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, she sat in her bedroom thinking about Michael's last hospitalization. He'd developed an abscess on his back from lying in bed too long. He'd hidden it for weeks until it ruptured, forcing an emergency room visit. They'd admitted him to room 412. The abscess was drained, but infection had spread. Sepsis weakened his already compromised immune system. 5 days later, he was gone. Michael's last coherent words echoed in her memory. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I could handle it. I thought being strong meant suffering alone." Ethan was following the same path. And Sarah had enabled it by avoiding the emergency room, by choosing her own trauma over her son's immediate need. Saturday night, Ethan's fever dropped to 99.5 degrees. The IV antibiotics seemed to be working. Ethan even suggested he might not need surgery after all. "Let's see what Dr. Harrison says Monday," Sarah replied, allowing herself a thread of hope. Sunday brought a brief return to normalcy. Tyler visited, bringing basketball magazines and easy laughter. Sarah and Ethan watched television together, sharing a bowl of popcorn. For a few hours, Sarah let herself believe the worst had passed. Monday morning arrived with deceptive sunshine. Sarah and Ethan drove to the surgical center in near silence, both lost in their own fears. "What if something goes wrong?" Ethan asked as they pulled into the parking lot. "This is routine. People get abscesses drained all the time." Sarah's reassurance sounded hollow even to her own ears. The pre-operative appointment began normally. Paperwork, vital signs, consent forms listing risks Sarah tried not to read too carefully. Then Dr. Harrison performed her examination. Her expression changed. "The lymph nodes have enlarged since Thursday," Dr. Harrison said. "I want to do an ultrasound before we proceed to surgery. We need to map the full extent of the infection." 2 hours later, Sarah and Ethan sat in an examination room waiting for ultrasound results. The technician's concerned expression during the scan had sent Sarah's anxiety spiraling. When Dr. Harrison returned, she carried printouts of ultrasound images. The abscess contains approximately 70 milliliters of fluid, quite substantial. More concerning are the lymph nodes. Several are significantly enlarged, some over 2 centimeters. She paused, and in that pause, Sarah heard everything she'd been dreading. "I want to be thorough," Dr. Harrison continued carefully. "During surgery, I'm going to take tissue samples of the lymph nodes." "Tissue samples?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You mean a biopsy?" "Yes, to rule out other causes of lymph node enlargement." The unspoken word hung between them like a guillotine blade. Cancer. Dr. Harrison was checking for cancer. Sarah excused herself to the bathroom, where her carefully maintained composure shattered. Her breath came in gasps. The bathroom walls closed in. She saw Michael's face, heard the oncologist saying, "lymphoma," remembered the feeling of her world ending. A nurse found her 10 minutes later, helped her through breathing exercises, grounded her back to reality. Sarah splashed cold water on her face and forced herself to return to Ethan. While Sarah had been in the bathroom, Ethan had asked Dr. Harrison the question burning in both their minds. "Am I going to die like my dad?" Dr. Harrison had been honest. "Your dad had cancer. This is an infection." They're very different conditions. But the biopsy means you think it might be cancer. The biopsy is precautionary. I've examined thousands of lymph nodes in my career. 99% of enlarged lymph nodes are reactive, your body fighting infection. That's what I expect to find. What about the other 1%? Dr. Harrison had paused before answering. Let's focus on the 99%. Surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Sarah and Ethan drove home through evening traffic, neither speaking. Fear occupied all the space between them. At home, over a dinner neither could eat, Ethan broke the silence. "Mom, if something happens to me," "Nothing will happen. But if it does, I need you to know I wasn't trying to hurt you by hiding it. I just wanted to be strong. Like Dad." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Your dad was strong in many ways, but hiding his pain wasn't one of them. That was his weakness, not his strength. Was he scared? At the end? Yes. And that's okay. Being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. They cried together then, carefully avoiding Ethan's right side, holding each other against an uncertain future. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she went to the garage and pulled out the storage box containing Michael's belongings, medical records, letters, photographs, his dog tags. At the bottom of the box, beneath folders and papers, she found an envelope addressed in Michael's handwriting. To Ethan, when you're old enough to understand. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was dated 1 week before Michael's death. Through tears, she read his words. His admission that hiding pain had been a mistake, his regret for not asking for help sooner, his advice to Ethan to be braver than he'd been. The final lines broke her. I had infections throughout my cancer treatment that I hid from your mother. They weakened me, contributed to complications. Don't repeat my mistakes. Your life is too precious. Be brave enough to ask for help. Sarah sobbed in the garage, clutching the letter. Michael had known. He'd known he was passing down a toxic pattern and had tried to prevent it. But Sarah had never found this letter, never given it to Ethan. If she had, would Ethan have told her sooner? At 5 in the morning, Sarah woke Ethan for the drive to surgery. She handed him the letter without explanation. Ethan read it in the car, tears streaming down his face. Dad didn't want me to be like him. No, Sarah whispered. He didn't. At the surgical center, as nurses prepared Ethan for anesthesia, he gripped Sarah's hand. If the biopsy shows cancer, promise you won't give up on me. I promise. But you have to promise me something too. No more secrets. No more secrets. They wheeled Ethan away at 7:30. The estimated surgery time was 2 to 3 hours. Sarah settled into the waiting room, surrounded by strangers facing their own fears, and began the hardest wait of her life. The surgical center waiting room smelled of recycled air and burnt coffee. Sarah sat on an uncomfortable vinyl chair, unable to stay still for more than 30 seconds at a time. She checked her phone obsessively, 7:45, 7:46, 7:47. Each minute crawled by with excruciating slowness. An elderly couple occupied the chairs across from her, the woman holding her husband's weathered hand. A young woman in her 20s sat alone in the corner, anxiously twirling her hair. Each family carried their own burden of waiting, their own prayers whispered to whoever might be listening. At 8:15, a nurse emerged through the double doors. Mrs. Mitchell, surgery has started. Everything's going smoothly so far. Sarah nodded, gripping her phone tighter. Tyler had texted twice offering to come sit with her. She'd declined. Some vigils required solitude. At 9 o'clock, another update arrived. Progressing normally. 2 words that should have brought comfort but only amplified Sarah's anxiety. What did normally mean when they were cutting into her son's body? The elderly woman noticed Sarah's distress. First surgery? No. Sarah's voice came out raw. Second time watching someone I love go under. The first time didn't end well. I'm sorry. The woman's sympathy was genuine. But he's young. Young people heal better than us old folks. Sarah wanted to believe that youth was armor against tragedy, but she'd seen too many hospital beds holding people too young to die. At 10:30, when Sarah had convinced herself the worst was over, a surgical nurse approached. Not Dr. Harrison, which immediately set off alarm bells. Mrs. Mitchell, Dr. Harrison asked me to update you. The surgery is taking longer than expected. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. Why? What's wrong? The abscess was larger and deeper than the ultrasound indicated. Dr. Harrison is being very thorough, making sure all infected tissue is removed. The nurse's professional calm did nothing to ease Sarah's panic. His vital signs are stable. It's just taking more time, probably another hour. After the nurse left, Sarah's imagination spiraled into worst-case scenarios, larger than expected, deeper than expected. What else might be unexpected? What Sarah couldn't see, what was happening beyond those double doors, would change everything. In the operating room, Dr. Rachel Harrison made her initial incision along Ethan's armpit crease at 7:45. The moment she opened the tissue, thick greenish-yellow pus erupted from the wound. 90 milliliters, 20 more than the ultrasound had estimated. "Suction," Dr. Harrison said calmly, though her mind registered concern. This had been brewing much longer than 3 weeks. Her surgical assistant worked quickly to clear the field while Dr. Harrison explored the abscess cavity with careful probing. What she discovered made her pause. This isn't a simple pocket. It's loculated, multiple chambers. The infection had created a complex network of pus-filled spaces, tunneling along tissue planes in unpredictable directions. Clearing this would require extending the incision and painstaking exploration of each pocket. "We're going to be here a while," Dr. Harrison told her team. "Let's make sure we get everything." By 8:15, she'd uncovered the true extent of the damage. The abscess extended nearly to Ethan's chest wall muscle, far deeper than any imaging had suggested. The surrounding tissue showed areas of necrosis, dead, blackened flesh that had to be removed completely, or the infection would return with vengeance. Dr. Harrison worked methodically, cutting away dead tissue while preserving healthy structures. The brachial plexus, the nerve bundle controlling Ethan's arm function, lay dangerously close to the infected area. One wrong cut could cause permanent damage. "Vessel bleeding," her assistant noted as a small artery began oozing blood. Dr. Harrison cauterized it quickly, but each complication added minutes to the procedure. She could feel the family waiting outside, feel their anxiety pressing against the operating room walls. She'd promised Sarah she wouldn't let Ethan become a statistic. She intended to keep that promise. At 9:45, as Dr. Harrison cleaned the deepest part of the cavity, her gloved finger encountered something that didn't belong. Something hard, metallic, foreign. Forceps. She grasped the object carefully and extracted it from the muscle tissue. Under the surgical lights, it gleamed, a small piece of metal, irregular in shape, approximately 4 millimeters long. One edge was smooth, almost polished. The other was jagged, as if torn from something larger. "What is that?" her assistant asked. Dr. Harrison turned the object over in her forceps, her mind racing through possibilities. "Send it to pathology. I want to know exactly what we're looking at." The object went into a specimen cup while Dr. Harrison continued working, but her thoughts kept returning to it. A 14-year-old boy shouldn't have metal embedded in his tissue. No history of trauma, no previous surgeries. Where had it come from? The shape nagged at her. She'd seen enough war injuries during her residency at Walter Reed to recognize shrapnel when she saw it. By 10:15, Dr. Harrison had moved on to examining the lymph nodes. 4 were significantly enlarged, the largest measuring 2.5 centimeters. She carefully excised the largest node completely and took smaller samples from 2 others. Under the bright lights, they appeared inflamed and reactive, fighting infection, not growing malignantly. But she'd learned long ago not to trust appearances. Only pathology could confirm what the naked eye suggested. At 10:45, satisfied she'd removed all infected tissue, Dr. Harrison began the closing process. She irrigated the cavity with liters of sterile saline, flushing away any remaining bacteria. A Penrose drain, a soft rubber tube, was placed to allow continued drainage over the coming days. The incision was closed loosely with several sutures, leaving space around the drain. "Let's wake him up," Dr. Harrison told the anesthesiologist. By 11:15, Ethan was breathing on his own in the recovery area, emerging slowly from anesthesia's fog. His first groggy words were predictable. "Mom?" "She'll be here soon," the recovery nurse assured him. "You did great." Ethan's hand drifted to the bulky dressing on his right side, feeling the tube protruding from it. "What's that?" "It helps drain fluid. You'll have it for a few days." "Did they find anything?" The question came out slurred but urgent. "Dr. Harrison will talk to you about everything." At 11:30, Dr. Harrison entered the private consultation room where Sarah had been directed. Sarah jumped to her feet the moment the door opened, her face a mask of barely controlled terror. "Is he okay?" "Surgery went well. Ethan's in recovery now. You can see him in about 20 minutes. Dr. Harrison gestured for Sarah to sit, taking the chair across from her. She explained the procedure in careful detail: the multiple pockets of infection, the extent of necrotic tissue removed, the drain placement, the expected recovery timeline. Sarah listened with the focused attention of a medical professional, asking the right questions, processing the information. "And the lymph nodes?" Sarah's voice trembled slightly. "The biopsy?" "I took samples from 3 nodes. They appeared reactive to me, enlarged because they were fighting infection, but I won't speculate until we have pathology results. That will take 3 to 5 days. Sarah exhaled shakily. "Do you really think it's just infection?" Dr. Harrison chose her words carefully. "In my 20 years of surgical practice, I've biopsied hundreds of lymph nodes. These looked consistent with reactive hyperplasia. That's my professional opinion. But I believe in being thorough." "Okay?" Sarah pressed her palms against her eyes. "Okay. Thank you. There's something else." Dr. Harrison pulled a small plastic specimen cup from her pocket. "Something unexpected." Sarah looked at the cup, at the tiny metallic object inside, her expression confused. "What is that?" "I was hoping you could tell me. It was embedded deep in the abscess cavity, surrounded by infected tissue." Sarah took the cup, holding it up to the light. "Is that metal?" "It appears to be." "Possibly shrapnel, given the shape and characteristics. Does Ethan have any history of trauma? Any accidents involving metal fragments penetrating his skin?" "No. Nothing like that. A few stitches from playground falls over the years, but nothing serious." Sarah's mind raced through memories. Could it have been there since birth? Something that happened during delivery? That's extremely unlikely. Foreign objects don't typically lodge in tissue during childbirth without being noticed. Sarah stared at the metallic fragment, and something clicked in her memory. "My husband Michael was a veteran, Vietnam. He had shrapnel in his body from combat, pieces that were too dangerous to remove surgically." Dr. Harrison leaned forward. "When did he pass away?" 3 years ago. Cancer? And before he died, would Ethan have had frequent close physical contact with him?" Sarah's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Every day. They were incredibly close. Ethan would hug him, lean against him while they watched television. Even when Michael was sick and it hurt, Ethan wanted to be near him." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Michael had open wounds from cancer treatment, radiation burns, pressure sores that wouldn't heal." Dr. Harrison nodded slowly. "It's rare, but documented in medical literature. Foreign objects can transfer between people through repeated intimate contact, especially when one person has compromised skin integrity. If your husband had shrapnel that was slowly migrating through his tissue, and if his skin barriers were broken down from treatment, it's theoretically possible for that shrapnel to transfer to someone else through sustained close contact." "Oh my God." Sarah's hands began shaking. "Michael's war is inside my son?" "I'll send this to a metallurgy lab. They can date it, identify its composition. If it's consistent with Vietnam-era ordnance, that would confirm the theory." Sarah sat in stunned silence, the small container clutched in her trembling hands. The war that had defined Michael's life, the trauma he'd carried in his flesh for over 50 years, had literally passed to the next generation. The metaphor was too perfect, too cruel. After Dr. Harrison left, Sarah remained alone in the consultation room. She didn't cry from relief that the surgery was successful. She didn't cry from fear about the biopsy results. She cried because somewhere in the terrible logic of what had just been discovered, she saw a truth too painful to bear. Michael had never escaped the war. And now, neither could Ethan. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, Sarah was finally allowed into the recovery room. Ethan lay on the adjustable bed, his face pale against white pillows, an IV line snaking into his left arm. A bulky dressing covered his right side, with a thin rubber drain tube protruding from beneath the bandages, dripping pink fluid into a collection bulb. "Hi, baby." Sarah took his left hand, careful not to jostle the IV. "You did so good." "It hurts, Mom." Ethan's voice came out thick with residual anesthesia. "I know. They'll adjust your pain medication." Sarah stroked his hair, the simple gesture grounding them both. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Did they find cancer?" Sarah's throat tightened. "We have to wait for the biopsy results, 3 to 5 days. But Dr. Harrison thinks it's just your body fighting the infection." "Thinks?" Ethan caught the uncertainty. "She won't know for certain until the lab results come back. But she's been doing this for 20 years. She said the lymph nodes looked reactive, not malignant." Ethan closed his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. Okay. Sarah wanted to tell him about the shrapnel, about the piece of his father's war that had been growing inside him. But not now. Not when he was vulnerable and frightened. There would be time for that conversation later. By 3 o'clock, Ethan had been moved to an inpatient room for overnight observation. Standard procedure after surgery involving anesthesia. The room was semi-private, shared with an elderly man recovering from hip replacement surgery. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting IV drips, asking about pain levels on a scale of 1 to 10. "Do I have to stay overnight?" Ethan asked, his voice small. "Just to make sure everything stays stable," the nurse replied cheerfully. "Most patients go home tomorrow." Ethan fell asleep by mid-afternoon, exhausted from surgery and pain medication. Sarah sat in the chair beside his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening to the reassuring beep of the heart monitor. At 6 o'clock, everything changed. A different nurse came in to take Ethan's temperature. The digital thermometer beeped and the nurse's expression shifted from routine to concerned. 102.3. Sarah stood immediately. "Why is he spiking a fever?" The infected tissue was removed. "Sometimes the body has a fever response to surgery itself. Let me notify the doctor." The nurse's calm professional tone did nothing to ease the knot forming in Sarah's stomach. Within 30 minutes, Dr. Harrison had ordered blood cultures and increased Ethan's antibiotic regimen. By 8 o'clock, preliminary blood culture results came back positive. "Bacteremia," Dr. Harrison explained when she arrived at Ethan's room. "Bacteria in his bloodstream. It's the early stage of sepsis. We're hitting it hard with IV antibiotics, vancomycin and zosyn. His hospital stay just got extended to at least 5 days, possibly more." Sarah felt the room tilt. Sepsis. The word that had killed Michael. "Is he going to be okay?" The question came out as a whisper. "We caught it early. He's young and otherwise healthy. The odds are in his favor." Dr. Harrison's words were meant to comfort. But Sarah heard the unspoken truth. Odds weren't guarantees. By 10 o'clock, Ethan's fever had climbed to 103.1 degrees despite Tylenol. His body shook with violent chills, rigors that made his teeth chatter and the hospital bed rattle. Sarah climbed onto the narrow bed, holding him as best she could while nurses applied cooling blankets. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," Sarah murmured, her own tears falling into his sweat-dampened hair. Ethan's words came out disjointed, confused by fever. "Dad? Is that you, Dad?" "It's Mom. Dad's not here. Tell him I'm sorry." "Tell Dad I wasn't strong enough." Sarah's heart broke at the apology her delirious son was offering to a ghost. Even in fever, even facing death, Ethan was apologizing for being human, for being vulnerable, for inheriting the very weakness he'd been taught to despise. At midnight, Dr. Harrison returned with grave news. "If his fever doesn't break by 2 a.m., we're transferring him to ICU." "ICU?" Sarah could barely form the word. "Is he dying?" Dr. Harrison met her eyes with unflinching honesty. "Sepsis is serious, but we caught it early before it progressed to septic shock. He's young, he's strong, and we're doing everything possible. I won't let him become a statistic, Sarah. I promise you that." But Sarah remembered similar promises made about Michael. Medicine couldn't always keep its promises. At 2:30 in the morning, with Ethan's fever still raging at 103 degrees and his blood pressure beginning to drop, they made the transfer to intensive care. The ICU was a different world. More machines, more monitors, more of everything except hope. They sedated Ethan to prevent seizures from the sustained high fever and placed additional lines for continuous monitoring. Sarah wasn't allowed to stay in the room. ICU regulations. She found herself in another waiting area, this one smaller and more austere, fluorescent lights humming overhead, industrial coffee going cold in a foam cup she couldn't remember getting. At 3 in the morning, Sarah called Tyler. "If something happens to Ethan, he'd want you to know he loved you like a brother." "Don't talk like that, Mrs. Mitchell." Tyler's voice broke. "Ethan's going to make it. He has to. His father didn't. But Ethan isn't his father. And you aren't alone this time. Don't give up on him. Please. I can't lose another person. I can't." Tyler's desperation cut through Sarah's despair. Tyler had lost his brother to suicide 2 years ago. He'd been carrying that grief, that guilt ever since, if Ethan died, it would destroy Tyler too. "I won't give up," Sarah whispered. "I promise." At 7 o'clock in the morning, Dr. Harrison found Sarah slumped in the waiting room chair, having not slept all night. His fever broke. 99.8 degrees. Blood pressure is stabilizing. Sarah couldn't process the words at first. "He's okay?" "He's not out of danger yet, but he's responding to treatment. The antibiotics are working. He's fighting, Sarah." They allowed Sarah into the ICU. Ethan was still sedated, still surrounded by machines, but his vital signs had indeed improved. Sarah climbed carefully onto the ICU bed, technically against regulations, but Dr. Harrison had given the nurses permission with a quiet, "She needs this." Sarah lay beside her son, listening to his heartbeat through the thin hospital gown, and finally allowed herself to believe he might survive. By late afternoon, Ethan was stable enough to have the breathing tube removed. He woke confused and frightened, his voice hoarse from the intubation. "Mom? Right here. You're okay. You're going to be okay." Ethan's hand found hers. "I saw Dad. In my fever, I think. He told me it wasn't my time yet." Sarah didn't know how to respond. Hallucination or something more. "What else did he say?" "He said he was sorry, and that he loves you." Whether those words came from Ethan's subconscious or from somewhere beyond comprehension didn't matter. They brought comfort. And right now, comfort was healing. The next day, Ethan was stable enough to transfer back to a regular hospital room. Tyler visited that afternoon, bringing balloons and basketball magazines, his relief palpable. Dude, you scared everyone. I'm sorry. Don't apologize for being sick. Apologize for not telling us sooner. I know. I messed up. Yeah, you did. Don't do it again. Their exchange was blunt, masculine, but underneath the tough words lay profound love and relief. On the 5th day after surgery, Dr. Harrison entered Ethan's room carrying a folder. Sarah gripped Ethan's hand instinctively. I have the pathology results. The room held its breath. No cancer, Dr. Harrison said clearly. The lymph nodes showed reactive hyperplasia. They were enlarged because they were fighting infection. Nothing malignant. Sarah and Ethan both started crying, clutching each other with the desperate relief of people who'd walked to the edge of an abyss and stepped back. So I'm going to be okay? Ethan's voice was full of wonder. Yes. 2 more weeks of antibiotics, physical therapy for shoulder mobility, and follow-up appointments. But yes, you're going to be okay. But before they could fully celebrate, Dr. Harrison's expression grew serious again. There's still the matter of the metal fragment. The lab confirmed it. The metallurgy report dates it to the 1960s or 70s. The composition matches ordnance used in Vietnam. Ethan looked confused. Vietnam? I wasn't even born. Sarah squeezed his hand. It's from your father. And with those words, a different kind of reckoning began. The afternoon sun filtered through hospital blinds as Dr. Harrison pulled up a chair, creating an intimate triangle with Sarah and Ethan. She placed an enlarged photograph of the metal fragment on the bedside table. This piece of shrapnel is consistent with ordnance used during the Vietnam War. Given your father's military service record and the location where we found it in Ethan's tissue, I believe I can explain how this happened. Sarah leaned forward, her medical training demanding concrete answers even as her heart recoiled from what those answers might mean. Your father had shrapnel that military doctors deemed too dangerous to remove, correct? Dr. Harrison looked at Sarah. Yes, pieces near his spine and lungs. The VA said surgery would be riskier than leaving them in place. Shrapnel doesn't always stay put. It can migrate through soft tissue over time, slowly, millimeters per year, but it happens. During your husband's cancer treatment, his skin would have been severely compromised. Radiation burns, chemotherapy effects, pressure sores from extended bed rest, all of these create openings in the skin barrier. Sarah's mind flashed back to Michael's final months, the angry red burns on his back and side, the wounds that wouldn't heal, the way his skin seemed paper-thin, tearing at the slightest friction. Dr. Harrison continued, Ethan, your mother said you hugged your father every day, even during his illness. Is that right? Yeah. Ethan's voice was barely audible. I'd lean against his right side when we watched TV. His left side hurt more from the treatment, so I was always on his right. That's the mechanism, Dr. Harrison explained. Through months of repeated close contact with your father's skin barrier compromised and the shrapnel slowly working its way toward the surface, it eventually transferred from his tissue to yours. It lodged in the soft tissue under your armpit and remained dormant for 3 years. Ethan stared at the photograph. So, the infection happened because of this? Because of Dad's shrapnel? Your immune system eventually recognized it as a foreign object and mounted an inflammatory response. The abscess formed as your body tried to expel it. That's why antibiotics alone couldn't resolve the infection. They couldn't address the underlying foreign body triggering your immune response. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Part of Dad's war has been inside me for 3 years? Ethan's voice cracked. Sarah pulled him into a careful hug. He didn't know, baby. He couldn't have known. I'm not blaming him. Ethan wiped his eyes. It's just weird, like he's still connected to me somehow. Dr. Harrison offered the specimen cup. Would you like to see it? Ethan held the container, examining the tiny fragment that had caused such devastating pain. This was in Dad for 50 years? Probably longer, Sarah confirmed. He carried this every day and never complained? Sarah's throat tightened. He complained, just not to us. That was his mistake. Thinking silence was strength. Ethan turned the specimen cup slowly in his hands. I get it now. He wasn't strong because he stayed silent. He was suffering because he stayed silent. Yes, Sarah's voice broke on the word. Exactly. I won't do that. I won't make his mistake. Ethan set the cup on the bedside table with surprising finality. I'll never hide pain again. The next afternoon, Tyler visited during a rare moment when Sarah had gone to the cafeteria. He closed the door behind him, his expression unusually serious. Dude, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told your mom weeks ago. Ethan shifted in the hospital bed. What? I knew you were sick. I knew for almost 3 weeks before you collapsed. The confession hung in the air between them. Tyler pressed on, words tumbling out in a rush. You told me about the bump under your arm. You said it was probably nothing. You made me promise not to tell anyone, and I didn't. I kept your secret, even when I could see you were getting worse, even when I knew something was really wrong. I asked you to keep quiet, Ethan said. You were being a good friend. No, I was being a coward. Tyler's voice cracked. After Jake died, my therapist told me his suicide wasn't my fault, that I couldn't be responsible for other people's choices. So when you were sick and hiding it, I told myself the same thing. It was your choice to tell your mom or not. Your business, not mine. You were respecting my privacy. That's bullshit and you know it. Tyler's eyes filled with tears. I was protecting myself. I didn't want to be the guy who snitched and then had you hate me for it. I chose being liked over keeping you safe. If you had died, Ethan, that would have been on me. I would have lost you the same way I lost Jake. Ethan reached out his left hand. But you did tell someone. You called 911 when I collapsed. Only because you were already unconscious and I had no choice. You saved my life when it mattered most. That's what counts. If I'd told your mom earlier, you might not have needed surgery, might not have gotten sepsis, might not have almost died. We can't play the what-if game. We'll go crazy. Ethan squeezed Tyler's hand. Yeah, you probably should have said something sooner. But I shouldn't have put you in that position. I shouldn't have asked you to lie. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of mutual accountability settling between them. No more secrets? Tyler finally asked. No more secrets. And next time I try to hide something stupid, you have my permission to narc immediately. Tyler laughed through his tears. Deal. 4 days later, Sarah was checking Ethan's vitals when a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. I always said you were too stubborn for your own good. Sarah spun around. Linda stood there, her older sister, whom she hadn't spoken to in 5 years, holding a small overnight bag. What are you doing here? Tyler called me. Told me Ethan almost died. Did you really think I wouldn't come? Sarah's defenses rose instinctively. We're fine. You didn't need to. Yes, I did. Linda set down her bag with finality. Sarah glanced at Ethan, who was watching this exchange with confusion, then stepped into the hallway with Linda. The moment the door closed behind them, years of suppressed anger erupted. You told me to abandon my husband when he was dying, Sarah hissed. I never said abandon him. I said let hospice take over the care before you killed yourself trying to save him. Linda's voice rose to match Sarah's intensity. There's a difference. You wanted me to give up on Michael. I wanted you to survive. Linda's shout echoed down the hospital corridor, making a passing nurse glance their way. She lowered her voice, but not its fierce emotion. Mom died taking care of Dad. I was 15. I watched it happen. I watched her work herself to death, refusing help, insisting she had to do everything herself. "You were only 10. You don't remember it clearly, but I do. I swore I would never let you do the same thing." Sarah's anger faltered. "That's not what this was about, wasn't it? You almost let Ethan die because you were too traumatized to take him to the ER where Michael died. You're so busy carrying everyone else's burden that you're destroying yourself, just like Mom did, just like Michael did." And now, Ethan was learning to do the same thing. The truth hit Sarah like cold water. 3 generations, each one teaching the next, that love meant suffering and silence, that asking for help meant weakness, that carrying burdens alone was noble instead of destructive. "I don't know how to stop," Sarah admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know how not to give everything. You ask for help. That's how you stop." Linda pulled Sarah into a fierce embrace. "I'm sorry I wasn't clearer 5 years ago. I'm sorry my fear for you came out as judgment of Michael. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until you accept that you don't have to do this alone." Sarah clung to her sister, crying for the first time since Ethan's surgery with something other than fear. "I'm sorry I shut you out. I'm sorry I let you." 2 days later, a FedEx package arrived addressed to Sarah Mitchell. Inside were Michael's complete VA medical records, requested weeks ago but only now arriving. Sarah and Linda sat together in Ethan's hospital room while he slept, reading through decades of documentation. The pattern emerged with heartbreaking clarity. Throughout Michael's cancer treatment, VA doctors had documented recurring infections. Multiple times they'd recommended surgical removal of the remaining shrapnel fragments. Multiple times, Michael had refused. "Too risky," one note quoted him saying. "Not worth the time away from treatment." Another note, "Patient insists he can manage discomfort without intervention." The final entry, from Michael's oncologist, made Sarah's hands shake. "Patient's persistent refusal to address concurrent infections has significantly compromised treatment efficacy and overall prognosis. Infections have prevented use of optimal chemotherapy dosing and caused multiple treatment delays." "He chose to keep the pain," Sarah whispered. "He actively chose it." Linda read over her shoulder. "Maybe he thought the shrapnel was part of his identity, part of being a soldier, part of surviving the war. He carried the war in his body because he couldn't let go of being at war." Sarah's voice hardened with realization. "And it killed him. And it almost killed Ethan." 3 generations, Linda said quietly. Mom died caring for Dad. Michael died refusing care. Ethan almost died copying Michael. So, what do? We break the cycle." Linda met Sarah's eyes. "Right here, right now, with Ethan." On the 8th day after surgery, Ethan was cleared for discharge. 2 weeks of oral antibiotics, physical therapy appointments, and regular follow-ups stretched ahead, but he was going home. As nurses finalized paperwork, Sarah picked up the specimen cup containing the shrapnel fragment. Dr. Harrison had cleaned and preserved it. "Ethan, the shrapnel, do you want to keep it?" "A piece of your father?" Ethan looked at the tiny fragment that had caused such catastrophic damage. He thought for a long moment. "No, I don't want it." Sarah felt surprise register on her face. "Are you sure? Dad carrying that thing didn't make him strong. It made him sick. It hurt him for 50 years, and then it hurt me. I don't want to carry war, mine or his. What should we do with it?" Ethan's answer came with quiet certainty. "Can we bury it with Dad? Give it back to him? Maybe then he can finally let it go, too." Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Yes, we can do that." 3 days later, they would stand at Michael's grave and bury the shrapnel with him, laying to rest not just a piece of metal, but a legacy of suffering passed from father to son. But for now, in this hospital room, Sarah held her son's hand and felt the first stirrings of something she'd lost 3 years ago: hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope that had sustained her through crisis, but the quiet, steady hope that came from finally understanding that healing required more than survival. It required transformation. It required breaking the cycle. It required learning that the bravest thing anyone could do wasn't suffer in silence, but speak the truth and ask for help. The Mitchell family had been at war for 3 generations, against enemies, foreign and domestic, against illness, against their own destructive patterns. Today, finally, they were beginning to make peace. 3 days after discharge, they gathered at Riverside Memorial Cemetery under a pale blue sky. Sarah, Ethan, Linda, and Tyler stood before Michael's headstone, the engraved dates marking a life cut short at 42. Ethan held the small specimen container, the shrapnel fragment barely visible inside. His right arm, still healing from surgery, moved carefully as he knelt and dug a small hole beside the headstone with a trowel Linda had brought. "Dad, this is yours. We're giving it back." Ethan's voice was steady, stronger than it had been in weeks. "You carried this for 50 years. You don't have to carry it anymore. And neither do I." He buried the container, covering it with earth. Sarah placed white roses on the grave. Tyler draped Ethan's number 23 jersey over the headstone temporarily, a gesture of respect between friends who understood loss. They stood in silence, a family healing, a friendship strengthened, a legacy transformed. A cardinal landed on Michael's headstone, its red feathers bright against gray granite. It regarded them for a moment before flying away into the trees. "I think he approves," Ethan said quietly. Sarah took her son's hand. Linda took her other hand. Tyler stood beside Ethan. Together they walked back to the car, leaving the past buried where it belonged. 3 months later, Jefferson High School's gymnasium erupted with noise as the basketball team took the court for Friday night's game. Ethan wore his number 23 jersey with visible pride, his surgical scar evident whenever he raised his right arm to shoot. Sarah sat in the bleachers with Linda, watching her son warm up. He moved differently now, not quite the explosive athlete he'd been before, but capable, determined, healing. "Does it hurt?" a teammate asked, pointing at the scar during a water break. "Sometimes," Ethan answered honestly. "But I'm working through it." Another player, Josh, pulled up his sleeve to reveal burn scars from a childhood house fire. "We've all got something." Coach Thompson, overhearing, raised his shirt to show a long surgical scar. "Heart surgery, 2012. These scars just prove we fought and won, boys." The game was close. With 30 seconds left and the score tied, Ethan found himself open for a three-pointer. He took the shot. It bounced off the rim, but Ethan grabbed the rebound and immediately passed to Tyler, who was better positioned. Tyler scored. The team won. In the parking lot afterward, Ethan walked with Sarah toward their car. "I didn't score the winning point," he said. "No, but you helped your team win? That's better." "Because I trusted them?" "Because you knew when to ask for help." That evening, in the kitchen where their crisis had begun months ago, Sarah made dinner while Ethan did homework at the table. The routine felt familiar, but everything had changed. Michael's photograph was back on the refrigerator. Linda came over twice a week. Friends filled the house with noise and laughter. "Mom, my shoulder's a little sore from the game." Sarah looked up from the stove. "Want some ice?" "Yeah, thanks. Thanks for telling me." Ethan smiled. "I promised. No more secrets." Sarah brought him the ice pack, kissed the top of his head, and returned to cooking. Through the window, evening sun painted the kitchen gold. Somewhere outside, a cardinal sang its evening song. Inside, a mother and son had finally learned that strength wasn't found in silence, but in the courage to speak, not in suffering alone, but in trusting others to help carry the weight. They had survived, and now they were learning to truly live. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't carrying our burdens alone, it's finally setting them down. Sarah and Ethan's story reminds us that the patterns we inherit don't have to define us. Whether it's the silence we learned from our fathers, the self-sacrifice we watched our mothers model, or the wars we carry in our own bodies and hearts, we have the power to choose differently. Michael spent 50 years carrying shrapnel he couldn't release, teaching his son that strength meant suffering in silence. But Ethan learned something his father never did, that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That scars don't have to be hidden. They can be honored as proof we survived. That the greatest gift we can give the people we love isn't our strength, but our honesty. If you've ever lost someone to silence, if you've watched someone you love hide their pain, if you've carried your own burdens so long you forgot what it felt like to set them down, this story is for you. Have you ever kept quiet about something important to protect someone you loved? What would you tell your younger self about asking for help? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.